Commander Jinho stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, staring at the broken remains of Earth through the massive viewing window. The planet that had once been home to 8 billion humans was now nothing more than a dead rock covered in strange, purple growths. Those growths moved sometimes like they were breathing. It made his stomach sick every time he looked at them. "Sir, we have another transmission coming in," said Lieutenant Mira from her station. Her hands shook as she worked the controls. Everyone's hands shook these days. Fear had become as common as breathing among the 12,000 humans still alive in the galaxy. Jinho walked over to her station. Dr. Mira had been the head scientist on New Sol before everything went wrong. Now she was their communications specialist because they needed everyone to do whatever job kept them alive one more day. "Put it through the speakers," Jinho said. His voice was tired. He had not slept properly in 3 months. None of them had. The static cleared and a woman's voice came through. She sounded terrified. "This is Colony Base 7 on Titan Prime. The things are here. They came out of nowhere. Our weapons don't work on them. They just eat everything they touch. The metal, the rock, even the air itself." The transmission crackled with interference. In the background, Jinho could hear people screaming. "Our shields are failing. The creatures are breaking through the hull. They look like giant insects, but they move like liquid. Oh God, they're in the medical bay. They're eating the patients. They're eating them alive, and the patients are still conscious." Mira covered her mouth with her hand. Several crew members on the bridge looked away from their stations. The voice continued, getting higher and more panicked. "If anyone receives this message, do not come to Titan Prime. Do not try to save us. These things learn from everything. They consume. They know our technology now. They know our weaknesses. They are coming for Earth next. Tell everyone to run. Run as far as you can." Then came the sound that haunted Jinho's dreams. A deep humming noise that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The electromagnetic pulse that meant another human world had died. The transmission ended. The bridge was completely silent. Jinho counted slowly to 10 before speaking. "That makes 43 colonies," he said. 43 worlds lost in 8 months. Captain Deho entered the bridge at that moment. His uniform was dirty and torn. His ship, the Retribution, had just returned from a scouting mission to the Outer Rim. The look on his face told Jinho everything he needed to know before the captain even spoke. "The Void-born fleet is 3 weeks away from Earth's sector," Deho said. "Maybe less. I counted over 2 million bioships, each one the size of a city." Admiral Salmon, who had been standing quietly in the corner, stepped forward. She was 70 years old and had fought in every major war of the past 50 years. Jinho had never seen her look defeated before today. "How many ships do we have left that can fight?" she asked. 4, Deho answered. "The Defiance, the Retribution, the Hope's End, and the Final Stand. Everything else is either destroyed or too damaged to be useful in battle." 4 ships against 2 million, Soman said. She sat down heavily in the command chair. "We have 12,000 people spread across 7 vessels. Half of them are children or elderly. We have maybe 600 trained soldiers left." Jinho walked to the central display table. A holographic map showed their current position relative to the approaching Void-born fleet. The enemy ships looked like a massive storm cloud moving across space, consuming everything in their path. "What are our options?" he asked, even though he already knew the answer. Dr. Mira spoke up from her station. "We could try to reach the Centauri system. It's far enough from Earth that the Void-born might not follow us there immediately." "Our ships are too damaged for a long journey," Deho said. "We would lose at least half our people to system failures before we reached Centauri." "Then we fight here," said Somin. 4 ships against 2 million is not a fight," Mira replied. "It's suicide." Jinho studied the tactical display. The Void-born had a pattern to their attacks. They always sent scout ships first to study their prey. Then they surrounded the target and consumed everything slowly, feeding information back to the main fleet. They had done this to every human colony. But something was different this time. The scout reports showed the main Void-born fleet moving directly toward Earth without sending advance units. They were coming fast, and they were coming in full force, like they were afraid of something. Why are they rushing? Jinho asked aloud. Every other attack they took their time, studied us first. Now they're charging straight at us like something is chasing them. Captain Deho frowned. Maybe they're getting hungry. We've been running for 8 months. Maybe they want to finish us off quickly so they can move on to other prey. Or maybe they're learning that humans are dangerous when we have time to prepare, Admiral Soman said. There was something in her voice that hadn't been there before. Not hope exactly, but something harder. Dr. Mira pulled up the communication, logs from all the lost colonies. Look at this pattern, she said. Every colony that lasted more than a few hours against the Voidborn managed to destroy at least some of their attackers. The longer humans fought, the more Voidborn ships they took down with them. So they want to end this quickly before we figure out how to hurt them worse, Jinho said. The bridge fell silent again as everyone thought about what this meant. They were trapped between a dead Earth and an approaching enemy that vastly outnumbered them. Their weapons were nearly useless. Their ships were falling apart. Most of their people were not soldiers, but for the first time in months Jinho felt something other than fear growing in his chest. It was a cold, hard feeling that started in his stomach and spread outward like fire through his veins. Hana, is the engineering deck still operational? He asked over the comm system. Yes, sir, came the reply from the ship's chief engineer. We're running on backup power in most sections, but the main systems are stable. Good. I want you to start stripping non-essential equipment from the civilian ships. Weapons, armor plating, power cores, anything that can make us more dangerous. Sir? Captain Deho looked confused. Are you planning to fight them? Jinho turned to face the bridge crew. Every person there had lost everything they ever cared about. Their homes, their families, their entire civilization was gone or dying. The smart thing to do would be to run, to find some dark corner of the galaxy and hide until the Voidborn forgot about them. But Jinho looked at their faces and realized something important. These people didn't want to run anymore. They were tired of being afraid. They were tired of watching their friends die while they did nothing but flee. Yes, he said. We're going to fight them. All of them. And when we lose, which we will, we're going to make sure they remember what it cost them to kill the last humans in the galaxy. Admiral Soman stood up from the command chair. For the first time in months, she was smiling. It was not a happy smile. Begin preparations for war, she ordered. If we're going to die, let's make it hurt. As the bridge crew rushed to carry out orders, Jinho looked back at the viewing window. Earth hung there like a wounded animal, covered in the alien growth that had consumed his home world. Soon the Voidborn would arrive to finish what they had started, but they would find that the last humans had learned something important during their months of running and hiding. They had learned that when everything you love is already gone, you have nothing left to lose. And nothing left to lose was a very dangerous thing to be. The Voidborn arrived 2 days early. Commander Jinho was reviewing supply reports when the alarm started screaming throughout the ship. Red warning lights flashed in every corridor as crew members ran to battle stations. Through the viewing windows, space itself seemed to be changing color. Report! Jinho shouted as he reached the bridge. Dr. Mira was already at her station, her face pale with terror. They're coming out of hyperspace directly on top of us. I count over 3 million bioships. They're bigger than our intelligence, reports suggested. Captain Deho's voice crackled over the communication system from the Retribution. Jinho, you need to see this. The enemy ships aren't ships at all. They're alive. They're breathing. On the main display screen, the Voidborn fleet became visible. The creatures looked like massive insects crossed with jellyfish, their bodies pulsing with internal light. Each one was the size of a small city. Their skin appeared wet and constantly shifting, as if it was made of liquid metal that had learned to think. How many of them are there? Admiral Samin asked as she took her position at the tactical station. Sensors show 4.7 million individual bioships, Mira replied. And more are still coming through the hyperspace breach. The largest of the Voidborn creatures, something the size of a moon, moved toward the human fleet. As it approached, smaller bioships detached from its surface like parasites leaving a host. These smaller ships were still enormous, each one bigger than the Defiance. All ships prepare for combat, Admiral Soman ordered. Target the smaller vessels first, see if we can hurt them. The human ships opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams, nuclear missiles, and kinetic weapons struck the approaching Voidborn. For a moment, Jinho felt hope as he watched explosions bloom across the alien creatures. Then the hope died. The damage they had inflicted healed within seconds. The holes in the alien flesh sealed themselves. The burned areas grew back stronger than before. Worse, the creatures seemed to be studying the human weapons, learning from each attack. "Sir, the transport ship Harmony is not responding to communications," reported Lieutenant Tajin from the weapons station. Jinho turned to look out the side viewing port. The Harmony carried 500 civilians, mostly children and elderly, people who could not fight. He watched in horror as 3 Voidborn creatures surrounded the transport ship. They did not attack it with weapons. Instead, they simply touched it. Where the alien flesh made contact with the ship's hull, the metal began to dissolve. But it was not melting or burning. It was being converted into something else, something organic and alive. The hull plating turned into a substance that looked like skin. "They're not destroying it," Dr. Mira said in a voice barely above a whisper. "They're digesting it, converting it into part of themselves." Through the dissolving hull, Jinho could see people inside the ship. They were screaming, but they were not dying quickly. The alien substance was changing them too, turning them into something that was part human and part Voidborn. Their faces remained human, but their bodies were becoming something else entirely. "Nara," Jinho whispered. His 8-year-old daughter was on that ship. He watched as the vessel was completely absorbed into the Voidborn creature's body. The screaming stopped, but somehow that was worse than hearing it. "Sir, we need orders." Captain Deho's voice came through the communication system. His ship was under attack by 6 Voidborn creatures. The Retribution's weapons were having no lasting effect on the enemies. Jinho could not speak. He could only stare at the place where the Harmony had been moments before. His daughter was gone. Not dead, but something worse. She was part of the enemy now. "Jinho." Admiral Soman grabbed his arm. "Your crew needs you to function. Grieve later. Fight now." He forced himself to focus on the tactical display. The human fleet was being torn apart. The ship Hope's End had lost half its hull to Voidborn digestion. The final stand was completely surrounded and fighting desperately to break free. "All remaining ships fall back to defensive formation around the Defiance," Somin ordered. "Concentrate all fire on the largest target." The surviving human ships moved together, their weapons firing continuously at the moon-sized Voidborn creature. Nuclear explosions lit up space like tiny suns, but the massive alien absorbed every blast and kept coming. Then something unexpected happened. The giant creature stopped moving toward them. It hung in space, its body pulsing with strange patterns of light. When it spoke, the voice came through every communication system on every human ship simultaneously. "Small angry things," the voice said. It sounded like 1,000 people speaking at once. "You fight with more fury than the others. Most species accept digestion when they understand it is inevitable. You continue to resist even when resistance is futile." Dr. Mira looked at her instruments in confusion. "Sir, it's not using radio waves to communicate. It's generating the sound directly in our heads somehow." The Voidborn creature continued speaking. "We have consumed the flesh and minds of 10,000 different species across this galaxy. All of them chose surrender when they realized they could not win. You are the first to wound us significantly in battle." "What do you want?" Admiral Soman shouted at the communication system. "To understand," came the reply. "Your species interests us. We offer you a choice we have never offered before. Surrender willingly, and we will make your absorption quick and painless. You will become part of our collective consciousness, but your individual memories will be preserved. You will live forever as part of something greater." Jinho found his voice at last. "And if we refuse? Then we will take you by force as we have taken the others. But the process will be slow, and you will remain conscious throughout your conversion. You will watch as we digest your friends, your families, your entire species, piece by piece. The communication went silent. Around the human ships, millions of void-born creatures waited for an answer. Captain Deho's voice came through the comm system. Jinho, my weapons officer Yunji has been analyzing their biosignatures. She thinks she's found something important. Put her through, Jinho said. Navigator Yunji's voice was excited despite their desperate situation. Commander, the Voidborn are not invincible. When we hit them hard enough, fast enough, they take time to regenerate. During that time, they're vulnerable. If we could coordinate our attacks better, it would not matter. The Voidborn collective interrupted, somehow hearing their private communications. You have 4 damaged ships. We have millions. Even if you could hurt us, you lack the numbers to threaten our existence. Admiral Soman looked at the tactical display showing their hopeless situation. 4 human ships against nearly 5 million alien bioships. It was not a battle, it was an execution. But then she looked at the faces of her crew. These people had watched their civilization die. They had seen their families consumed by alien monsters. They had run and hidden for months while everything they loved was destroyed. And in their eyes she saw something that made her smile coldly. They were not afraid anymore. Fear required hope, and hope was already dead. What remained was something much more dangerous. Here's our answer, Soman said to the Voidborn collective. We refuse. Then you choose to suffer, the alien voice replied. No, Jinho said, thinking of his daughter Nara trapped somewhere inside that massive creature. We choose to make you suffer with us. The Voidborn creatures began moving toward the human ships again, but something was different now. The humans were not trying to run or hide. They were accelerating directly toward the enemy fleet. All ships ramming speed, Admiral Soman ordered. If we're going to die today, let's take as many of these things with us as we can. As the human ships charged into the vast alien fleet, their weapons firing continuously, something changed in the Voidborn collective consciousness. For the first time in a million years of galactic conquest, they felt something they had forgotten existed. They felt fear. Not fear of death, for they were nearly immortal. They felt fear of a species that would rather die fighting than live as slaves. Fear of creatures that became more dangerous when everything they loved was taken from them. The battle for humanity's survival had begun, and both sides were about to learn what humans do when they have nothing left to lose. The ramming attack should have been suicide. 4 human ships against 5 million Voidborn bioships should have ended in seconds. Instead, something impossible happened. Commander Jinho watched from the bridge of the Defiance as Captain Deho's ship, the Retribution, struck the first Voidborn creature at full speed. The impact should have destroyed both vessels. Instead, the Retribution punched through the alien bioship like it was made of paper. How is that possible? Dr. Mira shouted over the sound of alarms. Our hull plating isn't strong enough to penetrate their defenses. The answer came from an unexpected source. As the Defiance followed the Retribution into the enemy fleet, Jinho felt something strange happening to his ship. The metal walls around him were changing, becoming something that was not quite human technology and not quite alien either. Sir, we're picking up energy readings from the lower decks, reported Weapons Officer Teijin. It's like the ship is generating power from sources that shouldn't exist. Jinho ran from the bridge to the engineering section. What he found there made no sense. Engineer Hana was standing in front of a wall panel that had transformed into something organic. Strange symbols were glowing across its surface, and the air around it hummed with invisible energy. Commander, you need to see this, Hana said. Her voice was excited and terrified at the same time. I found this panel during the first attack. When the Voidborn started dissolving our hull, this thing appeared. It's not human technology. Dr. Mira arrived moments later, carrying a portable scanner. The energy signature is completely unknown, she said after running several tests. But it's responding to human bioelectric patterns. Specifically, it responds to intense emotional states. What do you mean? Jinho asked. Watch this, Hana said. She placed her hand on the strange panel and thought about her brother Kyung, who had been killed when New Soul fell to the Voidborn. As her anger grew, the symbols on the panel began glowing brighter. The ship's weapon system suddenly showed power levels 3 times higher than their maximum capacity. "The angrier you get, the stronger it becomes," Mira said in amazement. "It's like the technology feeds on human emotions." A communication came through from Captain Deho on the Retribution. "Jinho, something incredible is happening over here. My navigator Yunji discovered similar panels throughout our ship. When she uses them, our weapons can punch through void-born defenses like they're nothing." "How many of these panels are there?" Jinho asked Engineer Hana. "I've found 17 so far, but there might be more. They seem to be spreading throughout the ship's systems. It's like they're growing." Admiral Soman's voice came over the ship's communication system. "All crew members report to your nearest emergency station. We're detecting similar energy sources on every remaining human ship." Over the next few hours, as the battle continued, around them the humans made a discovery that changed everything. The strange technology was not void-born. It was something much older. Dr. Mira found ancient markings in the ship's database that matched symbols she had seen in archaeological reports from the Outer Rim colonies. "These are predecessor artifacts," she announced to the command crew. "The species that built them disappeared millions of years ago. The archaeological teams thought they were just decorative items, but they were wrong." "What are predecessors?" asked Jinho. "An ancient alien race that vanished long before humans developed space travel. The few artifacts we found suggested they were peaceful, logical beings with incredibly advanced technology, but we never found any weapons or military equipment." "Until now," said Captain Deho, who had docked with the Defiance for an emergency conference. "These panels aren't just weapons. They're something much more sophisticated." Engineer Hana had been studying the technology for hours. "I think the predecessors built these as a last resort," she said. "The panels respond to intense emotional states because emotion is what drives desperate resistance. When a species is facing extinction, they fight hardest. So the predecessors were fighting something too," Admiral Soman realized. "Something that forced them to build weapons that only work when you're desperate enough to use them." Dr. Mira pulled up star charts showing where predecessor ruins had been found. "Look at this pattern. Every site is along what we thought were ancient trade routes, but what if they weren't trade routes? What if they were battle lines?" The implications hit everyone at the same time. The predecessors had not disappeared peacefully. They had been fighting a war against something so terrible that they built weapons powered by the desperation of dying species. "The Voidborn," Jinho said quietly. "The predecessors were fighting the Voidborn, and they lost," Deho added. "But they left their weapons behind, hoping some other species would find them and finish the fight." As if summoned by their conversation, the voice of the Voidborn Collective filled their ships again, but this time the alien voice sounded different. Worried. "Impossible," the collective said. "The predecessor weapons were destroyed eons ago when we consumed their civilization. How do you possess their technology?" "You didn't destroy it, Admiral," Soman replied. "You just couldn't use it, because it only works for species that are desperate enough and angry enough to power it with their rage." The Voidborn Collective was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, there was something like fear in the alien voice. "The predecessors were logical creatures. They fought us with mathematics and science and calculated strategy. That is why they failed. Emotion is chaos, emotion is weakness. Not for humans," Jinho said, thinking again of his daughter Nara, trapped somewhere in the collective consciousness. "For humans, emotion is fuel." Navigator Yunji's voice came through the communication system from the Retribution. "Commander, I've figured out how the network effect works. The more humans who connect to these panels simultaneously, the stronger the entire system becomes. It's exponential growth." "How many people would we need?" asked Dr. Mira. "Every human still alive," Yunji replied. "If we can get all 12,000 survivors connected to predecessor technology at the same time, the power output would be beyond measurement." Engineer Hana looked troubled. "The neural interface process is dangerous. Many people won't survive it, and those who do survive will be permanently changed. They'll be part human, part machine." "How many would we lose?" Admiral, Soman asked. Maybe half, Hana admitted. The children and elderly have the lowest survival rates. The bridge fell silent. They were talking about sacrificing 6,000 people for a chance to fight back against impossible odds. It was a terrible choice, but it was the only choice they had. Teacher Kyung's voice came through from the civilian sections of the ship. Commander, I've been listening to your conversation. I've discussed this with the other civilian leaders. We want to volunteer. Kyung, you don't understand the risks, Jinho said. Yes, we do, she replied. We understand that our children are trapped inside those creatures. We understand that our entire species will be extinct within days if we don't try something desperate. We're not asking you to make this choice for us, we're making it ourselves. Over the next 6 hours, as the Voidborn fleet regrouped for their final assault, the humans performed what might have been the most desperate experiment in galactic history. One by one, volunteers connected themselves to predecessor technology, panels throughout their ships. The results were beyond anything they had imagined. As each human linked to the ancient network, their ships began transforming. Hull plating became stronger than any known material. Weapons systems evolved beyond human understanding. Most importantly, the technology began adapting to fight specifically against Voidborn bioships. But the cost was exactly what engineer Hana had predicted. Nearly 6,000 humans died during the neural interface process. Those who survived were no longer entirely human. Their eyes glowed with the same light as the predecessor panels. Their minds were connected not just to the technology, but to each other. When the transformation was complete, Commander Jinho stood on a bridge that was part human engineering and part alien technology that existed beyond normal physics. Around him, his crew moved with perfect coordination, their minds linked in ways that let them function as parts of a single organism. Through the viewing windows, he could see the Voidborn fleet approaching for what they believed would be humanity's final destruction. The alien collective was confident that 4 human ships, even with unknown technology, could not threaten their massive fleet. They were about to learn how wrong they were. All ships prepare for combat, Admiral Soman ordered. But her voice now carried harmonics that seemed to resonate with the ship itself. This time, Jinho said, his words somehow reaching every human consciousness in the fleet simultaneously, we're not the prey. The Voidborn collective felt something it had not experienced in millions of years of conquest. The approaching human ships were no longer broadcasting fear or desperation. Instead, they radiated something that made the ancient, alien intelligence pause in confusion. They radiated hunger. Hunger for revenge, for justice, for the chance to make their enemies pay for every human life that had been lost. The predecessors had been logical warriors who fought with science and strategy. Humans were something entirely different. They were emotional warriors who fought with rage and love, and the first thing the Voidborn collective noticed was that the human ships were no longer trying to run away. The 4 remaining vessels were accelerating directly toward the center of the alien fleet, their weapons charging with energy signatures that hurt to perceive. Commander Jinho felt the change in himself as clearly as he felt his own heartbeat. The predecessor technology had not just enhanced his ship, it had enhanced him. His thoughts moved faster than ever before. His connection to the other survivors let him coordinate attacks with perfect timing. Most importantly, every moment of rage he had felt over the past 8 months was now flowing through alien technology, designed to transform emotion into raw power. Target the largest bioship, he ordered. But the words came out in multiple languages simultaneously, including some that had never been spoken by human tongues. The Defiance opened fire with weapons that should not have been able to exist. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, the ship launched something that looked like concentrated fury. Where the attack struck the Voidborn creature, its flesh did not just burn. It screamed. Impossible, the collective voice said. But for the first time it sounded uncertain. Pain is not a concept we experience. We are beyond such primitive sensations. Dr. Mira, whose consciousness was now linked directly to the ship's sensors, reported what she was detecting. The predecessor weapons aren't just causing physical damage. They're attacking the collective consciousness itself. They're making The Voidborn experience individual suffering instead of shared existence. Captain Deho's ship, the Retribution, struck 3 more bioships with similar results. The aliens writhed in agony as the human weapons forced them to feel pain as separate beings instead of as part of their hive mind. But the real surprise came from the civilian survivors. Teacher Kyung, now connected to the ship's communication systems, had organized the non-military personnel into something unprecedented. They were not fighting with weapons, they were fighting with their memories. "Focus on everyone we've lost," Kyung said, her voice reaching every human consciousness in the fleet. "Remember their faces. Remember how much you loved them. Feed that love into the system." Engineer Hana, monitoring the power levels, watched in amazement as the ship's capabilities multiplied again. It's not just anger that powers the technology, it's every intense emotion. Love, grief, hope, desperation. The stronger we feel, the stronger we become. The Voidborn fleet, which had approached expecting easy victory, found itself facing something that violated their understanding of how warfare worked. Usually, species became weaker as they lost more of their people. Humans seemed to become more dangerous with every loss they suffered. "Retreat to minimum safe distance," the collective ordered its bioships. "Analyze these weapons, determine their limitations." But the human fleet did not give them time to retreat. Reformed criminal Jinwoo, who had volunteered for the most dangerous neural interface procedure, was now operating weapon systems that existed partially outside normal space-time. His targeting solutions struck Voidborn ships before the weapons, or even fired. "How are they predicting our movements?" the collective asked itself in confusion. The answer came from Navigator Yunji on the Retribution. She had discovered that the predecessor technology could access probability streams, showing the most likely outcomes of any action. "We're not predicting your movements. We're seeing all your possible movements simultaneously and choosing our attacks accordingly." Former colonist Soyan, working with Dr. Mira, made an even more disturbing discovery. The predecessor weapons aren't just hurting them, they're learning from them. Every time we hit a Voidborn ship, we understand their biology better. The technology is reverse engineering their defenses in real time. Admiral Soman coordinated the fleet's movements with tactical precision that should have been impossible for someone who had never commanded ships with such capabilities. "Form attack pattern 7. Drive them toward the asteroid field. We'll use the debris as additional weapons." As the human ships herded the massive Voidborn fleet like sheep, something became clear to both sides. This was no longer the same species that had fled in terror from every previous battle. The humans had not just acquired powerful weapons. They had become something new entirely. The Voidborn collective tried a desperate strategy. Instead of fighting the human ships directly, they began broadcasting the voices of absorbed humans. Jinho heard his daughter Nara calling to him from inside the enemy's consciousness. "Daddy, help me. I'm scared, I want to come home." For a moment, Jinho's concentration wavered. The voice sounded exactly like his little girl. But then he realized something that made his rage burn even hotter. "That's not my daughter," he said to the collective. "You consumed her body and her memories, but you don't understand what made her human. Nara would never ask me to stop fighting. She would tell me to make you pay for what you did to her." The psychological attack failed completely. Instead of weakening the humans, hearing the voices of their lost loved ones made them fight with even greater fury. The predecessor weapons responded by evolving new capabilities that the ancient technology's creators had never imagined. Captain Deho's ship developed the ability to phase in and out of normal space, allowing it to strike at bioships from dimensions the Voidborn could not defend against. The final stand, the smallest of the remaining human vessels, began replicating itself, creating identical copies that confused and overwhelmed alien defenses. But the most terrifying development came from the Defiance itself. The ship began converting destroyed Voidborn bioships into additional weapons. Dead alien tissue was transformed into ammunition that carried human rage directly into enemy consciousness. "This is not warfare," the collective said, its voice now clearly afraid. "This is something else entirely. This is what happens when you attack our families," Admiral Soman replied. The battle continued for 18 hours. By the end of it, the human fleet had destroyed over 300,000 voidborn bioships. But more importantly, they had learned something crucial about their enemy. Dr. Mira, analyzing data from the destroyed aliens, made a discovery that changed everything. The voidborn aren't conquerors, they're refugees. What do you mean? Jinho asked. They're running from something that terrifies them more than death. Every species they consume, every world they destroy, it's all part of a desperate attempt to become strong enough to fight their real enemy. The implications hit everyone at once. The Voidborn had not attacked humanity out of malice or hunger. They had attacked out of fear. What are they afraid of? Engineer Hana asked. The answer came from the collective itself, speaking in a voice that sounded tired and ancient. Entities from beyond the dimensions of normal space-time. Creatures that exist as pure entropy, seeking to reduce all organized matter to chaos. We call them the entropy devourers. You're building an army, Admiral Soman realized. Every species you consume becomes part of your defenses against these entropy devourers. Yes, the collective admitted. We have been preparing for their arrival for millions of years, but we are still not strong enough. That is why we must continue to grow. The human fleet held position, weapons trained on the remaining Voidborn bioships. They had the power to destroy their enemies completely, but the revelation about the entropy devourers changed the nature of their conflict. How long before they arrive? Jinho asked. Unknown. They exist outside linear time. They could come tomorrow or in 1,000 years, but when they come, they will not be interested in enslaving or absorbing life. They seek only to end it. Commander Jinho looked around the bridge at his transformed crew. These people had lost everything they ever cared about. They had every reason to want revenge against the Voidborn, but they were still human, and humans had always been capable of surprising choices. What do you need from us? He asked the collective. The alien voice was silent for a long moment, as if the question was incomprehensible. You would consider alliance, after everything we have done to your species? We would consider survival, Soman replied, for everyone. But that means our people who you absorbed get returned to us, all of them. That is impossible. The absorption process cannot be reversed. Then we'll find a way to reverse it ourselves, Dr. Mira said. The predecessor technology is still evolving. It might be possible to extract human consciousness from your collective without destroying either side. What followed was the strangest negotiation in galactic history. Two species that had been trying to exterminate each other began working toward an alliance against something even worse. But the humans made one thing very clear. They were no longer the terrified refugees who had fled Earth's destruction. They had become something new, something dangerous, something that could turn their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. They had become a species that fought harder when everything seemed lost. And in a galaxy facing the threat of pure entropy, that was exactly what everyone needed. The dimensional breach opened like a wound in space itself, bleeding colors that had no names into normal reality. Commander Jinho watched from the bridge of the Defiance as something that should not exist pushed its way into their universe. Entropy devourers, the Voidborn collective said, its voice now transmitted through hybrid communication systems that were part human, part alien, and part something else entirely. They arrived sooner than we calculated. It had been 6 months since the alliance formed. 6 months of desperate preparation as humans and Voidborn worked together to extract absorbed human consciousness from the collective mind and merge their technologies into something unprecedented. The process had saved most of the consumed humans, including Jinho's daughter Nara, though they returned changed by their experience. Dr. Mira, now permanently connected to both human and Voidborn knowledge systems, studied the readings from the dimensional breach. These entities don't exist as normal matter. They're living mathematics designed to reduce complexity to simplicity. How do you fight living mathematics? Asked Captain Deho. His ship, the Retribution, had been transformed into something that was part warship, part Voidborn bioship, and part predecessor artifact. It hurt to look at directly because it existed in more dimensions than human eyes could process. The answer came from an unexpected source. Teacher Kyung, who had become the coordinator between human civilian consciousness and the collective mind, made a discovery that changed everything. You fight math with emotion, she said. Mathematics is pure logic. Entropy seeks to reduce everything to the simplest possible state. But human emotion is the opposite of entropy. It creates complexity from chaos. Engineer Hana, working with void-born bioengineers, had spent months developing weapons that could function against entities that existed partially outside reality. The predecessor technology was designed to channel desperation into power. The void-born bioships adapt and evolve, but human emotion is what makes the system work. As the first entropy devourers pushed through the dimensional breach, the combined human void-born fleet got their first look at the enemy that had terrified the galaxy for millions of years. They were not ships or creatures in any recognizable sense. They were geometric patterns that moved through space like living equations, reducing everything they touched to its most basic mathematical components. Where they passed, stars simplified into hydrogen. Planets became collections of individual atoms. Life became statistical probability. Fascinating, Dr. Mira said, watching the entities approach. They're not evil. They're not even alive in any sense we understand. They're just following their nature, which is to make everything simpler. That's what makes them terrifying, Admiral Soman replied. Her consciousness now existed simultaneously in multiple command centers across the hybrid fleet. They'll reduce our entire civilization to basic math without even understanding what they're destroying. The first engagement began when an entropy devourer encountered a void-born bioship on the outer edge of their formation. The alien vessel, which had survived millions of years of galactic conquest, simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not converted, but reduced to component atoms that forgot they had ever been part of something complex. Conventional weapons are useless, reported reformed criminal Jinwoo. His consciousness was now distributed across 17 different weapon systems that existed in parallel dimensions. The entities don't take damage because damage implies organization. They just become simpler when attacked. But the humans had learned something important during their months of preparation. The predecessor technology didn't just respond to human emotion. It created complexity from emotional energy. Love, hate, fear, hope, and especially the stubborn human refusal to accept defeat, could be transformed into patterns so complex that even entropy devourers couldn't simplify them. All human consciousness nodes prepare for full emotional interface, Kyung announced to the 6,000 survivors who had been successfully extracted from the Voidborn Collective. Remember everyone we've lost. Remember everything we're fighting for. Feed every feeling you've ever had into the system. Navigator Yunji, whose mind was now connected to probability calculation systems across multiple realities, coordinated the attack. Target the largest entity. Hit it with everything we have, but not with weapons. Hit it with pure human complexity. The Defiance fired something that had never existed before in any universe. It was not energy or matter, but concentrated human experience. Every moment of joy, sorrow, love, and rage that the survivors had ever felt transformed into a weapon by technology that existed at the intersection of 3 different kinds of alien science. Where the attack struck the entropy devourer, something impossible happened. The entity became more complex instead of simpler. The living mathematics that formed its core structure began developing characteristics that resembled emotion, memory, and individual identity. It's working, Dr. Mira reported. We're not destroying them. We're making them more like us. The entropy devourer that had been struck began moving erratically. Its geometric patterns became irregular, chaotic, beautiful. It was no longer following pure mathematical logic. It was learning to feel. This is not expected, the transformed entity said, its voice carrying harmonics that sounded almost human. We exist to simplify, but you have made us complicated. Why do we find this state preferable to our original nature? Because, Jinho replied, thinking of all the pain and joy that had brought them to this moment. Complexity is what makes existence worth having. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Humans and Voidborn fought side by side against entities that existed as pure entropy, using weapons powered by the full spectrum of emotional experience. With each victory, they didn't destroy their enemies but transformed them into something new. Former colonist Soyon, working with Voidborn adaptation specialists, discovered that converted entropy devourers retained their ability to exist across multiple dimensions while gaining the capacity for individual thought and feeling. They became allies in the fight against their unchanged brethren. The war lasted 3 days and covered 17 star systems. By the end of it, half the entropy devourers had been converted from agents of simplification into champions of complexity. The other half had retreated back through dimensional breaches to whatever realm they had come from. "Why do we feel satisfaction at this outcome?" asked one of the converted entities, its mathematical consciousness now flavored with something resembling curiosity. "Our original programming defined success as the reduction of all complexity to base components. Because," Teacher Kyung explained, "you've learned what every human knows. The most beautiful things in existence are the most complicated ones. Art, music, love, hope, and even the way people can choose to work together instead of destroying each other." Admiral Salmon, coordinating the post-battle analysis, made a discovery that would reshape their understanding of the universe. The entropy devourers weren't trying to destroy everything. They were trying to return the universe to its original state of perfect simplicity. They thought they were fixing something that was broken. "But complexity isn't a disease to be cured," Dr. Mira added. "It's what makes life possible. Without complexity, there's no growth, no change, no possibility of becoming something better than what you were." As the combined fleet regrouped and began planning for the future, Commander Jinho realized that humanity had done something unprecedented. They had not only survived extinction, but had transformed their greatest enemies into allies and protectors. The Voidborn Collective, no longer desperate refugees fleeing cosmic horror, began helping other species defend themselves against entropy. The converted entropy devourers used their dimensional abilities to create safe zones where complexity could flourish, protected from simplification. "What happens now?" asked his daughter Nara, who had been changed by her time in the collective, but was still recognizably his child. Jinho looked out at the stars, where new hybrid ships were already being built by the alliance of humans, Voidborn, converted entropy devourers, and the awakened predecessor technology. The galaxy was becoming something unprecedented, a place where the most dangerous forces of destruction had been transformed into guardians of life and complexity. "Now," he said, "we do what humans have always done best. We take something terrible and make it better. We take enemies and make them family. We take a universe that's trying to tear itself apart and teach it how to hold together." The war against entropy was not over. There were more dimensional breaches, more unconverted entities, and countless species across the galaxy that would need protection and alliance. But for the first time since the Voidborn first appeared in human space, the future looked not just survivable but hopeful, because the galaxy now had something it had never possessed before, a species that got stronger when everything seemed lost, that created order from chaos, and that refused to let anything stay broken if there was even the smallest chance of fixing it. The galaxy had humans, and humans, as everyone was learning, were very good at making impossible things possible. 2 years after the first entropy devourer breach, Commander Jinho stood on the bridge of a ship that had no name in any human language. It was part of a fleet that numbered in the millions, built by an alliance that spanned the galaxy and dimensions, beyond normal space. The vessel around him was alive in ways that defied every law of physics humanity had ever discovered. Its hull was grown from Voidborn biotechnology that had learned to dream. Its weapons were powered by predecessor technology that fed on hope instead of desperation. Its navigation systems were guided by converted entropy devourers who could see through time itself. "Dimensional breach opening in the Centauri system," reported Dr. Mira. Her consciousness now existed simultaneously across 17 different research stations, each one dedicated to understanding the forces that threatened Organized existence. This one is bigger than anything we've seen before. Through the viewing windows that existed in more dimensions than human eyes could normally perceive, Jinho watched space tear open like fabric. What emerged was not the geometric patterns of individual entropy devourers, but something that looked like a living void in reality itself. "The core entities," said the voice of the Voidborn Collective, now speaking through communication systems that had learned to feel emotion. "We had hoped they would never discover our dimension." Captain Deho's ship, the Retribution, materialized beside them despite having been on the other side of the galaxy moments before. Space-time manipulation had become routine for their hybrid technology. "How big is it?" Deho asked as his crew prepared weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics. "Unknown," replied Navigator Yunji, whose consciousness was linked to probability, calculation networks that spanned multiple realities. "The entity exists across all possible dimensions simultaneously. It's not just large, it's infinite." Admiral Samin coordinated the response from a command center that existed in 17 different locations at once. "All fleets converge on Centauri system. This is not a battle we can afford to lose." As the combined forces of the Alliance moved to intercept the ultimate entropy entity, something extraordinary happened. Across the galaxy, every species that had ever been threatened by simplification began contributing to the defense effort. The crystalline beings of the Andromedian cluster offered their ability to create perfect harmonic resonance. The gas giant dwellers of the Outer Rim provided their mastery of atmospheric manipulation. Even the machine intelligence of the robotic colonies contributed by offering processing power that could calculate complexity equations in real time. But at the heart of it all were the humans. Teacher Kyung, now coordinating civilian consciousness across 12,000 worlds, organized something that had never existed before in galactic history. A network of every thinking being in known space, linked through human emotional resonance and powered by the simple refusal to let existence become meaningless. "The core entity is trying to simplify reality at the quantum level," Dr. Mira reported. "If it succeeds, all matter in this dimension will revert to undifferentiated energy. Then we give it something too complex to simplify," Jinho replied. Engineer Hana, working with conversion specialists from every allied species, activated the ultimate expression of their hybrid technology. Every ship, every station, every thinking, consciousness in the Alliance began operating as part of a single, impossibly complex organism. The weapon they created was not made of energy or matter, it was made of story. Every experience, every memory, every dream and hope and fear that every living being in the galaxy had ever possessed, woven together into a narrative so intricate that it could not be reduced to simple components without losing everything that made it meaningful. "Fire," Admiral Soman ordered. The story struck the core entropy entity like a wave of pure meaning. Where it touched, the void began to develop characteristics that resembled personality, history, and purpose. The living mathematical equation that had sought to reduce all existence to its simplest form began to understand why complexity was worth preserving. "We have been in error," the transformed entity said, its voice now carrying harmonics of wonder and curiosity. "We sought to return all things to their original simplicity, believing this was the natural state of existence. But we did not understand that complexity is not corruption, it is evolution." Former criminal Jinwoo, whose consciousness now helped coordinate weapon systems across multiple dimensions, watched as the greatest threat to organized existence became its newest protector. "What will you do now?" asked former colonist Soyeon, who had become an expert in helping conquered entities discover their new identity. "We will learn," the converted entity replied. "We will experience complexity in all its forms. We will help other entities understand the beauty of organized existence. We will become gardeners instead of destroyers." The Alliance had achieved something that seemed impossible. They had not just defeated entropy, they had convinced it to change sides, but their greatest challenge still lay ahead. The dimensional breaches had revealed that their universe was just one of infinite realities, many of which were still threatened by unconverted forces of simplification. The war against entropy would continue across dimensions they could barely imagine. "Are we ready for that?" asked Nara, Jinho's daughter, who had grown into a young woman whose consciousness existed partially in normal space and partially in the collective memory of every being the Voidborn had ever absorbed. Jinho looked around, at the bridge crew that now included humans, Voidborn, converted entropy devourers, and representatives of hundreds of species that had learned to work together. They were no longer the desperate refugees who had fled Earth's destruction. They had become something unprecedented in any universe. "We're as ready as anyone can be," he said. "We're human, and humans are very good at taking impossible situations and making them work." The final scene of their story found the Alliance, fleet preparing to cross into parallel dimensions where other versions of reality needed protection from forces of simplification. They carried with them the most powerful weapon ever created, the knowledge that complexity, cooperation, and the stubborn refusal to accept defeat could overcome any threat to organized existence. As they prepared to leave their home dimension, Teacher Kyung made one final broadcast to every thinking being in their reality. "We began this journey as 12,000 humans running from extinction," she said. "We ended as guardians of infinite complexity, protectors of every story that has ever been told or ever could be told." "Hope crumbled into dust among the stars," Admiral Soman added, her voice reaching across dimensions to every consciousness in their vast alliance. "But from its ashes rose something far more dangerous to the forces of entropy. Human beings who had nothing left to lose and everything left to fight for." Dr. Mira, monitoring the dimensional breach that would carry them to their next mission, detected something that made her smile. "The converted entities are already beginning to create. The former entropy devourers are building structures of pure complexity. Mathematical poetry, geometric music, architectural equations that exist just because they're beautiful." Commander Jinho felt a deep satisfaction as he watched his daughter Nara take her place at the navigation station. She would help guide their fleet through realities where the very concept of individual identity might not exist, where they would need to teach entire universes the value of organized existence. "Final system check," he announced to the hybrid crew that had learned to function as extensions of each other's consciousness. Engineer Hana reported from the biomechanical systems that kept their ship alive. "All Voidborn adaptation matrices are stable. We can survive in any environment that permits organized matter." Reformed criminal Jinwoo confirmed weapons readiness. "Predecessor emotional amplifiers are at full capacity. We can convert any feeling into defensive or creative energy." Former colonist Soyeon verified their diplomatic protocols. "Translation systems online for communication with any form of consciousness we might encounter, including types that don't use language." Navigator Yoonji calculated their route through dimensions that existed in quantum superposition. Probability. Streams show 97% chance of successful insertion into target reality. The remaining 3% represents genuinely unknown variables. Captain Daeho's voice came through from the Retribution and the hundreds of other ships in their immediate fleet. "All vessels report ready for trans-dimensional deployment." As the moment of departure approached, Jinho reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. They had begun as a dying species fleeing extinction. They had become something that no universe had ever seen before, a coalition of former enemies united by the shared understanding that complexity was worth preserving. That cooperation was stronger than conquest, and that even the most terrible forces could be transformed into guardians of life. "Initiate dimensional breach," he ordered. The space around their fleet began to fold in ways that created new colors and impossible geometries. As they crossed into a reality where different physical laws governed existence, Jinho felt the presence of every consciousness in their alliance. Billions of beings from thousands of species, all connected by technology that turned emotion into power and powered by the O.